Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. Thank you so much for tuning into my YouTube channel. I really do appreciate the support that you've been giving me. So, for returning viewers, welcome back. For new viewers, my name is Dennis Akoyo, and in this channel, we usually have a deep dive on several financial skills that can help us better manage our personal finances. So, in this specific episode, we are going to look at one critical topic, and this is a topic that everyone asks out there. So, if I'm earning 10,000, how much should I pay as my rental, as rent for my house? If I'm earning 20,000, how much am I supposed to pay? If I'm earning 30,000, what am I supposed to pay for my house rent? If I'm earning 50 or 40 or even 100,000, how much am I supposed to budget for my rental expense? And this is something which very many people have not really been able to crack it down. So you either end up not budgeting for it well, and most of the mistakes that we do is we over budget. So you earn, let's say, 30,000, and you end up paying almost 50% of your earnings as rent. You earn 100,000, you stay in a house somewhere of 50,000. But is that sustainable? That is the question you're asking. Is it sustainable, or will you just be spending all your income on rent? So today we are going to have a deep dive on how you're going to determine what the amount of rent price you're supposed to consider, or what budget you're supposed to work with. And for you to first decide how much you're supposed to pay as rent, it needs to be relatively in line with the income that you're receiving, because you can't just wake up in the morning and I'm like, I want to stay in a house of 50,000 and you're being paid 60,000. It is not logical. It doesn't make sense. So today I'm going to take you through 5 key pointers, and this is what will help you to distill, or rather to determine, how much you're supposed to make as your rental payment. So if you're paying less, you can kindly upgrade. It doesn't hurt if you upgrade based on your income, as long as you're within the margins that are workable for you. And also, if you are overpaying, it is time for you to consider maybe moving to a more affordable, something that is in line with the income you're earning. So if this is content that you are interested in, kindly remember to like and subscribe. The buttons are just at the bottom of the screen. So without further ado, I think let us jump into the topic. So first of all, how are you going to determine the cost of your rental expense? It is simple. Apply the 30% rule. And the 30% rule is whereby, apologies for that, the 30% rule is whereby you do what is the 30% of your income. That is the that is the cap of your cost as far as rent is concerned. So let us work with a figure like 50,000. So you are being paid 50,000. How much are you supposed to pay for rent? Or what is the margin that you're supposed to consider as your rental payment? So that is 30% of 50,000. That brings our cost to 15,000. So basically, if you are being paid 50,000, you're supposed to look for houses that are within 15,000. So you don't end up underspending, or you don't end up overspending, because the key thing is you cannot spend all your income on expenses. Remember, you have other obligations like savings, you have other obligations like maybe buying or paying for utilities. You are also supposed to, let's say, buy groceries, and even you're supposed to have something aside that will sustain you for that entire period of time. So you are supposed to ensure that you work with 30% of your income. That is what you should consider paying as rent. Now, another thing, and remember, that is the maximum recommended. So if you pay anything more than 30% of your income, then technically it means you are overspending. Based on your income, and you're paying over, let's say, 50% of your income as rent, that means you are overspending. Then you are also supposed to consider, and that is still under the first rule, applying the 30% rule. So you're also supposed to consider the outcome. And the outcome of this is, if I pay 15,000, then that means I'm left with 35,000. within the 35,000, I'm able to now plan and distill my budget. How? You are able now to buy your groceries, you are able to save, you are able to maybe pay other expenses like utilities, because some expenses, like for example in Kenya, you just pay the rent, you have to pay the garbage aside, you have to pay, let's say, you have to pay the water side, and in other apartments, if you have gym, if you have other utilities that you need, or other services that you need, maybe there is service charge, etc, etc, etc. So you also have to put all this into consideration. So if I'm paying 30% for my rent, I am left with 35,000. So that 5,000, I'm able to plan myself within this, so that I'm able to sustain myself for the entire month. Now, number two, you're also supposed to adjust for financial obligations. Now, what am I saying? Assuming you have a loan of 5,000 that you are paying on a month to month basis. So technically, it means you cannot pay 30% as rent. It means you now need to calm down a little bit. And this is why I'm saying, when it comes to budget, you're supposed to make budgets that are flexible, accommodating any other financial obligations that you might be having along the way. So let's say you say, okay, because I have all these obligations and I have a loan that I'm paying for 5,000, basically I cannot calculate my rental payment with that 30%, 30% application rule. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now pay 25%. So 25% of the 50,000 is going to be put on rent. And when you do a calculation of the 25%, it comes to around 12,500. So that means you'll be left with 37,500, unlike before, where you'd be left maybe with, let's say it was 35,000. So this gives you a breather. And a breather means you are paying 12,500 as your rent, you're left with 37,500, and that means you're flexible enough to meet other financial obligations, including, let's say, the loan that you're paying on a month to month basis. And that means you can also save, you can also pay your utilities, and you can also purchase things like groceries, or even take yourself out. Who knows? Now, that is also, or that was the second pointer, where your budget, or when considering what percentage to pay as rent, you're not supposed to overlook other financial obligations that you might be having. Now, another thing is you are also supposed to prioritize saving goals. How are you supposed to do this? By ensuring that you tell yourself, okay, what am I working towards? I presume everybody who is watching this has something that is working towards. So what are you working towards? What do you want to do? How much savings do you want to have in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, and in the next even 1 year? So when you are prioritizing your saving goals, it means you're also supposed to consider, maybe let me not pay the 30%, let me consider paying out of my 100% income, let 20% be dedicated to my rental expense. So 20%, that is 10,000. And that means if you can work with, let's say, 10,000 as your rental payment, you're left with 40,000. That means you can even say, because I have 40,000, let me dedicate 10,000 as my savings every month. So I'm staying in, let's say, a house of 10 to 12,000. That gives me, that leaves me with 40,000. So that means I have enough money for me to put in my savings. And you can imagine, if you are left with 40,000 and you just save 10,000 every month, it means that by the end of the year you'll be having 120,000. And I have not even touched on other investments that you can put that 10,000, so that your money works for you. That is saved for another video. But you can just imagine, by looking at the long term, if I try and, let's say, not work with the 30%, but because I have saving goals, let me work with 20%. By just making that decision, you are left with a whole lot of amount to work with when it comes to you meeting your saving goals. So those are also factors you're supposed to consider. Now, uh, this is the last pointer that I'm going to touch on, and I know I said five, but I think I'm only going to share four key pointers that will assist you in deciding how much percentage of your income should you pay as rent. Now, this last pointer is, you're supposed to also consider adjusting based on location, because in some locations you might go and they're so expensive. So you go to this specific location, they are so expensive, or rather, maybe the convenience of you commuting from your place to work, you are only limited to this specific location. And in this specific location, there is the houses are expensive. So what are you going to do? This is where now you come and say, so if you're not a family guy and you're running, let's say 50,000, you can, let's say, and the rental expense within where the available houses that you have, let's say, is 20,000. So it won't make sense for you to consider paying 20,000 out of the 50,000 as your rent. So this is just a sideline advice where I'm saying you can maybe consider getting a roommate so that you have some cost sharing between you and your roommate. Maybe, okay, we have a rent of 10,000, you pay 10, I pay 10, and this life goes on. But it is even lucky, you are even lucky when maybe you have a wife or your spouse or your husband is also working and you're really trying to decide, okay, how are we going to foot in this budget? My husband is working, I am also working. So basically that's easier. You can remove 10,000, I remove 10,000, we do some cost sharing and life goes on. So those are the decisions and those are the things you're supposed to consider when it comes to how much am I supposed to pay for my rent in relation to the income that I'm earning on a month to month basis. Now, what I want to do for you is, yes, there is a set rule of 30% of your income should be dedicated to your rent, but it is not constant. It is flexible. Remember, this can be affected with your financial goals. This can be affected with the location that you're going to live. This can be affected with other financial obligations that you're supposed to meet. So you're not supposed to be rigid. You're supposed to be flexible enough to understand, okay, so this, okay, I'm earning 50,000, but basically I do not have any other financial obligation. So yes, I can manage the 30%. Or rather, I am earning 50,000, but I have several financial obligations. And it is evident I cannot manage the 30%. So you need to be flexible enough to consider adjusting, let's say 20%, between 20 to 30%, so that you have enough room for your breather, maybe to improve on your savings, maybe to pay that financial obligations that you have, and life goes on. Apologies for that. Apologies for that. I was just receiving a call from one of my consultancies, so apologies for that. Then you're supposed to be flexible when it comes to adjusting. I think that is a point at which I've said. Then you're also supposed to consider your future financial health, and that is very important. You cannot be working hand to mouth. Mostly when you're salaried, you cannot be working hand to mouth. Your salary is paid on the 5th, on the 6th, you have zero. You can't be doing that. In fact, the first thing that you're supposed to do immediately your salary hits your account is savings or investment. Then now pay the expenses. You'd rather not you'd rather have zero in your account, but you have money placed in your emergency fund, you have money placed on your short-term or long-term investments, and you have money placed on your savings. So that is a very good plan. So you have first to have a custom approach, considering all the factors that I've just mentioned. Number two, you're supposed to come up with a budget that gives you that flexibility. So you're not tongue tied. Like immediately this money comes in, I pay 30,000, then the 20,000 I spend on this, then I'm left with nothing. No, you're supposed to be flexible enough. And lastly, you're supposed, as you make these plans, you're supposed to consider your future financial health. I think with all these key pointers, you are now in a position to clearly sit down and say, okay, have I been doing it the right way? I'm being paid this, and what am I paying as rent? Does it really make sense, or am I overpaying? Am I underpaying? Do I need maybe to improve my life? Do I need maybe to reduce when it comes to my rental expenses? I believe this video will be in a position to guide you. So without further ado, I want to appreciate you for sticking until the end of this video. Remember to like and subscribe if this is the kind of content that you love. And I want to wish you a blessed Sunday. Have a good day.